Hey guys, today I'm doing a motherboard replacement on the Samsung Galaxy notebook. This one is one that came in, I think it had a spill and just needed a motherboard replacement. And the first thing I'm going to do here is remove the bottom screws. There's a couple little screws under this rubber foot, I think is what it's called. So just remove those 4 screws under the rubber feet. And then I'm going to take a thin guitar pick and I'm just going to go along the edges here to try to pry open that bottom panel. And that comes up pretty easy. And the next step here is to detach that battery. I always like to detach the battery first when I'm taking apart a laptop, making sure it has no power. And then I'm going to remove some screws here to remove the battery, I believe. Yep, so now I've got the battery out of there. I'm just detaching some of the cables here, the Wi-Fi. It's the one I have my finger on there. You can just detach it from that little Wi-Fi card. You just kind of pull it up and it'll snap off the Wi-Fi card. And here I'm just detaching the speaker. You gotta be careful with this one. I just took a little flathead and pushed it up a little bit. But you want to be really careful. This is a delicate connection. That just kind of flips up. There's no locking mechanism or anything, but you want to kind of push up so it'll come off of the motherboard there. And I'm just going to remove the other Wi-Fi lead. And here I'm just flipping up the backlight keyboard lock. That's like a flip up, flip down lock style connection. So you flip it up to unlock it and flip it back down to lock that cable into place. Same thing with the touchpad here. And same thing as well with the keyboard. You just want to flip that connector up and then that ribbon cable will come out. And here I'm just detaching the I/O board cable. That's this I/O board is just a separate board apart from the motherboard that has a cable attached to it. And here I'm going to detach the fan cable. Usually it's a connector, but in this case it's a fan for the Samsung. And these are also extremely delicate. You want to flip up that connector just very carefully, not to break off the connector itself. See that little lock kind of flips up, and then you can slide that flathead underneath there and pull that cable out. But you just want to be extremely careful when doing that. Now the next step here is I'm going to take out the SSD. And this one did not want to come out of there. I think I have to grab a different type. Even though it's the right type, I think my Phillips, it's a really tiny Phillips, kind of worn down, so I took a one that's got a little bit more grit to it. Man, they really got that thing screwed in there tight for just a little screw. So you can remove the SSD. And here I'm just going to detach the video cable. Once again, just like a flip up style connector, you flip that connection up and then you can take the ribbon cable out. And now I'm going to remove the fan and heatsink screws and remove that assembly. And if you need this kind of service done, this motherboard replacement is something I do in my shop for a $69 labor charge at PCRepairHelp.net. I am doing the nationwide mail-in repair services for the laptop repairs. Alright, so now I can get that heatsink out of there. And there's a little screw that's holding that heatsink in, I believe. So now that thing can come out. And now I'm just removing the motherboard screws that hold the board down into place. So now with all those motherboard screws out, you can take out the motherboard. This is the old defective board. And now it's time for the new one. So now I'm just going to put the motherboard screws back in. And here I'm going to apply some thermal paste to the CPU and GPU here. I'm putting about roughly a BB sized dot onto that die. And I have a little applicator here that just kind of smooths it out and gets If you don't have anything to smooth it out, that's fine. You know, pretty much your heatsink, when you screw it back in, it's gonna, you know, kind of do the same thing. You're gonna even it out around the die. It's gonna kind of smush it evenly and spread it out. But I just try to do this in case to try to minimize air bubbles or anything. I don't think it makes a huge difference, but you know, it came with that little spreader here, so I figure I might as well just use it. But you don't want to put too much on. I see even the manufacturers, sometimes it's just all over the die, kind of oozing around the sides, and you know, you don't want to do too much. Too much can actually make the heat temperatures get worse instead of better. So you know, there is kind of a fine line on how much you want, but like I said, about a BB size dot roughly, and then you can just spread that out. And what I like about spreading it out too, if there's any excess, you can just remove it. So now the heatsink goes back on. And everything's just going to be in reverse order now. Now, at this point, I'm going to get the heatsink on, get the fans back in, connect up all the cables with keyboard, touchpad, backlight, etc. Get the battery back in there, SSD, and then fire this thing up. So now getting all those cables connected back up, touchpad, Wi-Fi, speaker, keyboard. You can just push back down on those speaker cables when you plug them back in, along with the Wi-Fi. You just want to make sure you line it up correctly, and then just kind of push down and snap it into place. And then I'm just using that pliers to kind of line it up. It can be kind of tough with your finger, so the tweezers or pliers or something to grab onto it while you use your other finger to push it down in the socket. And there I was just putting the SSD back in. Now I'm going to put the battery back on. You just want to line that thing up and it presses down. Just push it onto the motherboard, snap it in. And the last step here is to put that bottom panel back on, and this thing will be all set. I'm just kind of pushing around all the edges to make sure I got that bottom panel on there nice and secure. And last step, just put those 4 screws back in. And that's it. This was a Samsung Galaxy Notebook motherboard replacement, something that I do for $69 labor charge at PCRepairHelp.net. If you have any questions, just leave a comment. You can get a hold of us via our website. Thank you guys so much for watching.